Hey everyone, welcome to another week here at Political Capital, your best source for all the latest in BC political news and analysis. We've got a great show for you coming up this week. Thank you for listening to us, watching us on Check News on Sundays, on YouTube, or on your various podcast streams. And make sure you subscribe on your podcast because we have extra audio content for you there as well each and every week. Want to start the show off this week again, with an acknowledgement of the more than 750 bodies found in an unmarked grave in Saskatchewan on the site of a former residential school. We have on the show previously talked about the discovery of more than 250 bodies at the Kamloops residential school site, and continuing unfolding national tragedy. And I encourage anyone who is listening or watching the show this week to take the time to read, or at least start to read, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's reports. And I know there are many volumes, and I know that they are many hundreds of pages, and they look intimidating in some ways to begin. But these are stories that have been shared by members of First Nations across the country. When you talk to elders and leaders in the community, they say that they shared their experiences and their families' experiences, and it's up to the rest of us to begin to educate ourselves by reading those. So even if you can only read the summary, even if you can only begin one of the volumes, I think that's a good start to having a better and more educated conversation on this dark stain on our country's history. This is a show that we focus on political kind of ramifications and politics on the provincial and federal levels. And we're going to do that this week. We're going to start with the federal Crown-Indigenous Relations Minister, Carolyn Bennett, and the calls for her resignation this week. And I want to bring in the panel, and then we will discuss that, and we'll go on to some other topics here on the show. The panel, as usual, and I thank them all for being here. Maclean Kay, editor of the Orca.ca. Hello, Maclean.
Hey, Rob.
Katy Merrifield, Vice President of Wellington Advocacy. Katy, hello.
Hey, Rob. Happy to be here.
And Jillian Oliver, BC Green strategist. Hello, Jillian.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for coming. Let's go back to Carolyn Bennett, because it has been a week in which she has been in the news. The Prime Minister today on Friday is brushing aside calls for her resignation because of a text message she sent to independent MP from Vancouver-Granville, Jody Wilson-Raybould, the first Indigenous Attorney General in Canadian history, who tweeted out, I'll read the tweet here, with the horrific news out of Saskatchewan, our collective call again is for concrete transformational action. Justin Trudeau, if you care enough to make things right, stop your selfish jockeying for an early election, which no one really wants, and do what was promised in 2018. She received a text from Minister Bennett with one word, which said pension, ? And Wilson-Raybould is one of several MPs who are only eligible for their federal pensions starting at the 6-year mark, which comes up in October. And the insinuation, according to Wilson-Raybould, that was a racist text that reflects the notion that Indigenous peoples are lazy and only want money. She went public with that, and the minister had to apologize but did not resign. And the Prime Minister has not removed her from cabinet. So this has been a very bad week for that minister. I'm not sure about both this and her performance in general, and kind of the larger problems with cabinet ministers and the current federal government under fire. Let's go around the table and pick that up. Maclean, what do you make of this and the issue, I guess, of federal ministers very rarely seem to resign? And was this maybe even a resignable fence, or how do we kind of get our mind around it?
Well, I mean, when we first started talking about this offline as a subject, it was framed as should she resign? And, this morning it was made clear that that is not the plan, at least not in the short term. And so it's different now. It's, would it have better if she was going to resign? And the answer is, well, I mean, it might have looked better, and it might have been a good short-term win for Justin Trudeau and the government. But I mean, the extremely cynical take on this is that their calculation is almost certainly that this will blow over. There will be some other scandal or some other headline or some other news story that grabs attention in, literally 48 hours, and this will all kind of go away. Canada Day is sure to generate a lot of hand-wringing and discussion next week, and so chances are most people will forget who the minister is, much less should she have resigned. And so, should she have resigned? Yes, maybe it was an incredibly insensitive thing to send to somebody, and she had to have known it would be public. And so, at the very least, impulse control is an issue. But will we still be talking about this in 2 weeks? Sadly, I doubt it.
I mean, the news cycle, especially federally, when the early election call is in the wind, is moving so quickly. There's so many different things the prime minister is, handling. So vaccines, and he's kind of leadership on the world stage. There's a lot of moving parts there. But I don't know how long this lasts, and I don't know what it means for the future of that minister. Jillian, what do you make of it?
I think that it does have the potential to come back to bite the Liberals should we find ourselves in an early election of their making. Public polling shows that this issue has risen up in terms of voters' consciousness. This is one of the top 5 issues now for voters, and I think it'll be a major election issue because chances are we're going to continue to find more tragic realities that have happened at residential schools in the coming weeks and months. And I think that having a minister whose job it is to lead reconciliation and to build trust with Indigenous communities to not step down is a very damning indictment of the government's approach to the issue and their record, which they'll be running on. On the other hand, I think that her resigning would also validate politically for them that they, are different behind closed doors than they purport to be in public, which is sort of I think kind of like a festering perception of the Liberals. And so I don't think they have an easy decision here, but I think that it definitely could be a factor in the election.
Katie, what do you think of all this?
I guess on a lighter note, I actually think Bennett should resign for being stupid enough to send a snotty text to somebody that has shown in the past they have no qualms on releasing recorded calls. Like, political acuity much? Like, that was an absolute fail. She should resign for the reasons that Maclean and Jillian outlined, but she won't, especially with a looming federal election. Frankly, this Liberal government gets away with everything. They got away with blackface. They got away with oppressing and then removing 2 senior, highly qualified ministers, not to mention their utter failure to address sexual misconduct in the military. Now this, just for a marked contrast here, Bev Oda, Conservative MP and cabinet minister, had to resign over $16 orange juice. Let's take that and compare it to everything that the Liberals have gotten away with. It's rather nauseating, to be honest.
Yeah, that $16 orange juice lives in infamy, but I think we often come back to it as an example of how, sometimes politics can be relatable to people on very small issues. Like a glass of orange juice should not cost $16, but larger issues sometimes go over people's heads and they don't pay attention to them. So, billions in spending, or the SNC Lavalin scandal, corruption allegations, and people just kind of yawn. So we'll come back to that. Katie, you raised a lot of interesting points there. We'll come back to it later in the show on kind of a grab bag of federal issues, because there's a lot moving federally, a lot of scandals at play, and that election call in the wind. So we will pick that up in a minute. I want to switch topics here to a housing report. A joint federal BC housing report actually came out late last week as the legislature was closing. It was a report that recommended changes to improve housing affordability. A panel of experts had been working on this for a couple years, led by former NDP cabinet minister Joy McPhail, the chair of ICBC, so a friendly face for the NDP government. But it had representatives from the business community, developers, the nonprofit housing sector, the tech sector, economists on it. And they came together with an 89-page report with some major, big recommendations, 2 of which were eliminating the capital gains tax on your, the exemption on the capital gains tax on your primary residence. So basically, if you sell your home, paying tax on your profits, which is not currently the situation in Canada, and then eliminating the BC Homeowners Grant, both of which were dead on arrival because neither the federal nor the provincial government want to tick off voters by taxing them or removing, tax gains from them. So let's just go around on that, because, we hear constantly that the housing affordability issue is so complicated, so difficult. How can any government begin to tackle it? Can governments begin to tackle it? And here we have a report with solutions on the table, dead instantly, because they're not going to be popular. And how do we deconstruct that in a kind of political sphere. Why don't we start with you, Katie? What do you make of this?
Yeah, so the fact that they rejected those two proposals was not surprising at all to me. When you appoint a panel with heavyweights from industry, you want to give them a lot of latitude and freedom in their analysis and recommendations. However, it is a very effective communications tactic to predetermine on government's behalf which ones they want to accept and which ones they want to reject, and be public about that very, very quickly, so not to sow fear and doubt. So when they came out immediately, that did not surprise me in the slightest. Like, yes, it's interesting, it's good policy, but the politics are terrible. Like, there's not a snowball's chance in hell I would ever recommend eliminating the homeowner grant or capital gains on a principal residence, particularly when there hasn't been like a full-scale discussion or consultation with the general public. There's a lot of interesting recommendations in the report itself, though. I think particularly the imposition of municipal time limits for approving new developments. We all know lack of supply is the main issue. So I think anything that speeds up development is the direction that the government should take.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we continue to hear lack of supply is the issue, but I sometimes I wonder. I mean, we're building more and more and more, and it's coming online as the market goes higher and higher, and the supply that comes online is as unaffordable as the supply that exists now. And sometimes I wonder if that supply issue is our real solution, or we're ever going to get there, or how that works. Maclean, what do you think of this? I mean, those are big issues, but I think Katie has a point there that they're political kryptonite in some way.
Yeah, I mean, we started this by saying, I think a little unfairly, to be honest, that, the government has rejected these proposed solutions. They rejected two of the proposals. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot more in the report that I think they probably will act on. I'm hoping they do. And the one the most significant one is the one you just mentioned, supply. I mean, Canada is last in the G7 when it comes to housing units per population. I think it's something like 472 to every 1,000. I mean, we're not just behind, we are so far behind. And you're right that, if you're in downtown Victoria, like I am right now, and I'm physically looking at construction of two different projects, we're still massively behind and still not even remotely keeping up with demand. So yes, supply is the single biggest issue. There are other issues, and there are other factors at play. But until we get our heads around not building enough units, even to meet immigration, housing supply will continue to be an issue, whether we, tax capital gains on sales of condos and houses or not. And so there is a lot in this report that is worth government having a good deep dive and look at, and I hope that they do. And even if they reject those two ideas, there's lots more that can be done and frankly needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. But when you look at all those condos being built in downtown Victoria, they're $500,000 condos. That's not affordable for most people. I don't know. I'm not sold that supply is our way out of this. I don't know how we build enough to bring prices down. Prices just continue to rise. The argument on the capital gains was that you could create a way to maybe soften the blow. So if you sell your primary home within 5 years, you pay a tax. If you wait longer than that, then you don't, or there's a dollar amount or whatever. But I get that for a lot of people, their house is a tax-free retirement plan, a profit that they're sitting on, a lottery ticket that they happen to have won because they purchased 30 years ago, and they're going to sell and transfer that equity through their generations to help their kids or their grandkids afford or fund their retirement. And you can't just pull the rug out from under them and say, we're going to tax you on that now, despite 30 years of planning that we weren't going to. So I get it. I just, it's a difficult series of solutions and discussions. All right, moving on subjects here. Let's go back to the federal issue. There's a ton going on in Ottawa. We talked about the text from Minister Bennett, but we also have, for the first time since 1913, a private citizen called to the House of the Bar and the House of Commons to be basically shamed by the Speaker. This was the head of the Public Health Agency, who did not turn over unredacted documents over the firing of two people at the microbiology lab in Winnipeg. We haven't basically ever seen that in modern times. Someone shamed in the House of Commons, a private citizen. And then the Liberal government took the Speaker to court over that issue to try and block the release of those documents. Plus, the Defense Minister, Harjit Sajjan, is in hot water for having a ministerial aide, a military aide, who has discreditable conduct allegations against him from his Vancouver police days and the looming federal election. There's just a ton going on there. Jillian, does anything stand out for you on how we should begin to kind of view any of this, or is the election wipe it all away, or what do we make of it?
Well, I think on the first issue, it's very interesting. It's something that, although I think it's something that kind of appeals more to sort of like parliamentary nerds than the general public. But why it matters is that I think, especially because we have a minority government right now, and the government is supposed to be accountable to Parliament because that's who voters elected. The government is not supposed to have the authority to sort of bring the hammer down on what the House of Commons decides by a democratic vote. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch. I suspect they'll find a compromise of some kind where they can kind of, have a closed committee or something like that. And then that it'll probably go away unless there's some scandal that I can't predict looming underneath. On the election implications specifically, I think, if I had to make a prediction right now, looking at what happened, what we talked about before with Minister Bennett, what's happened with Minister Sajjan and his refusal to resign, I think that the Liberals might be in a situation where they should be careful what they wish for. I could see another minority, especially with the NDP's sort of very solid numbers, solid approval rating for Jagmeet Singh. I saw that they're polling first in BC, which is, I think they're benefiting from the strong BC NDP brand here. And the government could end up in a situation where it has a minority, where it doesn't just have to rely on one party to pass legislation like it does now, where it could be a lot more of a complicated mix in Parliament. So it's going to be a really interesting one to watch. And I wonder, I don't know. I wonder what those discussions are like right now at the Liberal table.
Yeah, I agree. It could chip away at the idea of a majority government for Trudeau. But Maclean, you've been looking at the polling numbers, and I think you've got an open question on whether any of it moves the dial at all.
Well, it doesn't seem to. The laundry list of issues you presented they're all real, they're all accurate, and a lot of them are worth a lot of hand wringing about. And I'm sure Katy will add more. But the sad fact is, sad if you don't like the Liberal government, is it doesn't seem to be making much of a dent. The reason we're going to have an election in a few months is because the polls indicate the Liberals are headed for a majority government, at the very least a renewed minority. Yes, Jillian's right. That can change. It can change in a hurry. But until the Conservative Party and Jagmeet Singh and the Green Party and yes, the Bloc Québécois can make headway and start convincing people that they're a better option, we are where we are. There's a lot of people in the Liberal Party right now who are probably congratulating themselves on being geniuses. But the sad fact is the opposition parties haven't been able to take advantage of any of this.
Mm-hmm. Katy, bring us home on this.
Look, of course we're going to have an early election. Like Premiers Horgan, Fury, and Higgs all went to an election during COVID and won. Like the precedent is there. However, current polls, they have the Liberals up between 1 and 11 points. I did see one from about a week ago in Maclean's that shows that they are actually not on track for a majority at this time. They're looking at like 163 seats, but these change overnight. So I'm not going to put too much stock into that. I'm mostly concerned with this lab situation. I don't know about anyone else, but like the fact that there's allegations of shipping viruses from Winnipeg to Wuhan, 2 scientists were fired. The Liberals are now restricting documents, defying an order passed by the House of Commons to turn over all unredacted documents related to this issue. Like that is deeply troubling. I think it was a smart move for the Conservatives to withdraw their members from the National Intelligence and Security Committee. And I hope that they keep hammering on this issue, like casting doubt on our national security in the midst of a global pandemic. I believe that could move voter behavior personally.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll keep on that. We're going to do our hot take here to close off the show. We got a minute and a half for everybody, but the next time we'll actually see you, because we're not doing a show on Canada Day. Next time we'll talk to you will be post-Canada Day, Stage 3 in BC, where masks are recommended but not required, where the limits have disappeared on gatherings in most cases, or in a restaurant, that type of thing. This brave new world of recovery. So we're going to go around the table. What are you doing after Canada Day, and are you taking your mask off when you're out doing it? Let's go around. Jillian.
I am going to a Canada Day party, but I'm going to stay outside and I'm still going to wear my mask in closer proximity and when indoors.
Mm-hmm. I like the sound of that. Katie?
Yeah.
I will be in Victoria with you, Rob. We have a reservation
Oh,
at
right.
3:30.
Wait, are we taking our masks off?
I will wear a mask wherever the government tells me I have to.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right. Maclean?
I'll be in the Gulf Islands with my wife and son and no one else, and hopefully don't have to wear a mask the whole time.
Yeah. I might still wear one every now and again, depending on, in a grocery store or something. I don't know. It's going to be a little weird. I know they don't protect me from getting a virus, through my crummy little mask, and they only protect me from the droplets that I'm spreading, but it's a bit of a safety blanket that I don't know. It's going to be hard to shake that one. So, but yeah, it's a brave new world we're about to enter. We'll be back in your pod box after Canada Day. In the kind of a week after that. But make sure you subscribe and you'll get a ding the minute our new episode is out. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. We'll see you next week on Political Capital.